Hello friends, this is Molly with Soul School Tarot and Astrology, and what I've got for you guys here today is an astro forecast for Mercury Retrograde and the remainder of our eclipse season. The way I'm going to handle this today is I'm going to begin by just kind of talking about the nerd stuff. Like if you're into the astrology nerd stuff, I'm going to be talking about the specific aspects that are going to be at play. And then I will go ahead and go into the interpretation and then channel any intuitive messages that come in along the way. So if you don't want to hear the nerd stuff, my feelings are not hurt by that. I'm not offended. Go ahead and skip ahead. You can double tap on the right-hand side of your screen to skip 10 seconds at a time if you're watching this on a mobile device. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into this. And then I want to go ahead and give you a heads up. I'm going to be doing a pick a pile tarot reading after I do the astro forecast. So keep an eye out for that on my channel. Thank you guys so much for being here, for your likes, shares, and subscribes, and just for being a part of the Soul School community. So in general, I'm going to say that this Mercury retrograde and the remainder of the eclipse season is just chock full of opportunities to shift perspectives, to see things differently, to bring things inward a lot. So we've been dealing with a lot of planetary aspects that have been affecting the world at large and society at large. And a lot of what's going on in the next month or so is really going to be bringing it back home and having us focus our attention inwards a little bit more. At least we've got the opportunity to do that. All right. So here is the nerd stuff. Mercury is going to be retrograde from June 18th until July 12th. That includes our two more eclipses coming up. So on June 21st, there's going to be a solar eclipse in Cancer that I'll be talking about today. And also on July 4th or 5th, depending where you're at in the world, there is going to be a lunar eclipse in Capricorn. This is very interesting because we have just had a shift of the lunar nodes. If you know about the lunar nodes, the south node kind of represents the areas of your life where you have developed, where you have evolved. You've mastered those skills. That's your comfort zone. You're not really growing there much anymore. The north node represents that which we are aspiring to evolve towards. All right. So in other words, it can be a place where it's definitely outside of our comfort zone, but it's that place. What is it called in education? The zone of proximal development. Okay. That is basically a term saying if you're not being challenged, you're not really going to grow. But if you're being challenged way too much, that's going to kind of shut down the growth process as well. So if it begins to feel overwhelming, remember, Cancer is very, very, very significant throughout the next month, and it's going to be very important to self-care during this time period. All right. So anything that seems overwhelming and really big, just kind of try to shut it out as much as you can to self-care. That's just going to be a really, really important concept. All right. And then the Cancer and Capricorn, basically this nodal shift, we just moved out of a Cancer Capricorn axis with the north and south nodes. The south node was previously in Cancer and the north node in Capricorn. Since the beginning of June, they have shifted. And we're actually on June 21st, the sun is going to conjunct the south node in the late degrees of Gemini. So that's pretty important. If you guys are interested in learning more about north node and south node, I think I might make a video for you, but do some internet research. It's definitely an important point in the chart and also in transit astrology that really doesn't get a lot of attention, especially for people who I think are just learning astrology. North node and south node are very, very important concepts. So if you're an astrology nerd or aspiring to become one, definitely do some research on those areas in order to understand the significance of this shift. Mercury retrograde, like I said, June 18th, that's going to last until July 12th. Neptune's going to be retrograde from June 23rd until about November. And that is in the sign it rules, which is Pisces. Other important things that we've got going on is a Sun Mercury conjunction, which it's on my list of things to talk about. And then moving out of this retrograde and eclipse energy, when are we going to start to feel kind of like grounded again? Okay, so that's what I'm going to be talking about in today's episode. So let's go ahead and break these down one by one, and I'm going to be talking about the energies that these planetary transits are going to be carrying in. Mercury retrograde is happening in Cancer, all right? Retrograde in Cancer in general, I'm sorry, let me rephrase this because, again, we're in the shadow period right now, so my brain is already not really working sometimes. All right, Mercury in Cancer is actually a very, very interesting placement because Mercury represents our rational mind, whereas Cancer represents our intuition and emotion. I like to call it our moon space, all right? But Cancer represents our emotional body, if you will, whereas Mercury represents our mental body. And so to me, I really see this as an opportunity to unite the two of those two entities in ways that they may have been separate before. So in other words, I feel a certain way about a thing, but logically, I think about it differently. Those things are going to begin to reconcile. It's going to typically happen only after a clash between the logical rational mind and your emotional intuitive space. All right. So there may be a moment. And in fact, I kind of want to point towards the very beginning of July. On July 1st, the sun is going to come into conjunction with Mercury retrograde. And I feel like that's definitely going to be one potential moment of illumination where you can just kind of view the past differently. That, of course, is the objective of Mercury retrograde in general. That's the energy that the universe is trying to bring to us, to be able to help us to look at something differently. Specifically, when it comes to what nurtures us, how we define our sense of home, and then any sort of issues surrounding the mother wound. Now, I've talked about the mother wound in previous AstroForecast. To me, the way that I define that, we have mother wounds, we have father wounds, we have masculine wounds, we have feminine wounds, we have all sorts of stuff going on inside of us. When I refer to the mother wound, I am talking about any sort of trauma or disappointment or neglect that occurred during childhood, not necessarily when it comes to your mother, but when it comes to the things that were supposed to be in place to nurture you and to help you grow, to provide you a safe place in which you could begin to explore and discover and come into self-acceptance. All right. Self-acceptance is very, very important when it comes to discussing the mother wound. Okay. So are there any ways in which your childhood environment, the one that was supposed to nurture you, actually kind of maybe set up some structures in your mind that are counterproductive to that goal? All right. So how do your day-to-day thoughts maybe actually conflict with the things that your ability to nurture yourself, to make sure that your basic needs are being met, to make sure that you've got some sort of home base in the world. Also, any ways in which our rational understanding of the world, of our day-to-day lives, might be challenged by emotions and intuition. Okay. So you think about something being different than what you feel about something. This whole shebang over the next month or so, from about mid-June to mid-July, that's the area of our inner selves that is really, really going to be at play. So, let's talk about how the lunar eclipse in Sagittarius, which happened on June 5th, that full moon kind of served as a trigger point to exploring these issues. What happened with the Sagittarius full moon, most likely, is that something in your life got to be too big or too much. Jupiter rules Sagittarius, and it's a very expansive energy. Jupiter is currently retrograde, okay? It's actually one of 6 planets that will be retrograde by the end of June. And so what it wants us to do, what that Sagittarius full moon was prompting us to do, was to call attention to things that are really big in our lives, maybe even things that have been growing and getting bigger and bigger, and then suddenly it reached this breaking point. Okay. An example, just to kind of let you know how that played out within me personally, so that you can kind of adapt that to how it might have played out in your own lives. For me, it was my empathic abilities. All right. Literally, what happened during the Sagittarius full moon is I could not be around other people because I couldn't help but expand all of their, or to absorb. I'm sorry, I just don't know why the words aren't coming out right. I couldn't help but absorb all of the emotional and energetic energy that was going on around me. All right. It got to be too big. And that's really good because it prompted me to do 2 things. All right. That have to do with Cancer and Capricorn. Those are the locations of our next 2 eclipses. So in other words, the Sagittarius full moon gave me the homework that I'm going to have to work out during the the solar eclipse in Cancer on June 21st and the lunar full moon eclipse in Capricorn on July 4th and 5th. So when it comes to the Cancer eclipse, that is an opportunity for a major breakthrough when it comes to, once again, the way that we care for ourselves, the way that we nurture ourselves. I know that I have to implement certain self-care behaviors, right, in order to protect myself from taking on too much energy as an empath. So self-care is definitely at the forefront of my attention at this time. That's something that, of course, is going to be building until we get to that new moon in Cancer on June 21st. We're going to have another new moon in Cancer, by the way, on July 20th. And like I kind of talked about before at the beginning of this episode, that's when we're going to begin to really start to feel grounded again. Once all the eclipses have passed, once Mercury has gone direct in Cancer and is able to finish out the rest of its voyage through Cancer direct. Now that second eclipse, the one that's happening in Capricorn is about what we build. And in this specific scenario, me trying to figure out what do I do about the fact that sometimes my empathic abilities can be a little too much. Well, it's about what am I going to build? Boundaries. Okay. Boundaries is what I'm going to have to start building. Self-discipline is another really important concept when it comes to Capricorn. So what is it that you're building? What are you constructing? How are you creating boundaries for yourself? And how are you allowing self-discipline to be a way that you care for yourself? These are some of the concepts and energies that I think are really going to be coming up with that full moon lunar eclipse in the beginning of July. So that's going to be the 4th or 5th, depending on where you are at in the world. Now, we have another retrograde that I have to discuss, and then another planetary conjunction that's going on. And this is all happening in just a few days after Mercury goes retrograde on the 18th. So the day following, from about July 19th through the beginning of July, until about the 7th of July, we have an exact conjunction between Jupiter and Pluto. If you guys have been tuning into any of my astro forecasts and hearing me talk about the importance of Pluto being retrograde right now, Pluto is the planet that wants to prompt us to dive down into our subconscious, pull up all the emotional baggage that has been affecting us in ways that we probably don't understand, and just deal with them, put them to rest once and for all. All right. So while Pluto kind of seems like the bad guy because he triggers us and brings up all of our old shit, Like he really wants to help us out, okay? It's almost like going to a therapist. You're gonna have to talk about your trauma, and you're gonna have to talk about just all the ways that that still continues to affect you. But once you pull that up into the light, that's called shadow work. You've pulled something out of the shadows, out of the place where it exists within you, but you don't see it and you don't understand it on a daily basis. We don't really get how these things function in our daily lives and in our decisions. Okay, that's what Pluto's having us deal with. Pluto being in conjunction with Jupiter for this most of this period of time of the Mercury retrograde. Once again, Jupiter, that's the guy who's associated with that Sagittarius full moon that we just had. So whatever it is in your life that has gotten to be too big or too much, this conjunction between Jupiter and Pluto means this is the time to dig that stuff up. Don't expect to resolve it, because the two planets will meet up again once they're direct, once Jupiter goes direct. Okay. But right now is the time to recognize it, to go ahead, dig it up, unearth it. It's going to be ugly. And it might have to sit there for a while before it gets resolved, before it's really healed and put to rest. But that's the opportunity that we're being given. Another energy that's really helping us to look at past patterns that no longer serve us is the fact that the sun's going to be meeting up with the south node. I talked about this in the nerd part earlier. The south node represents our comfort zone that we have outgrown. All right. In fact, they're showing me an image of a plant in a pot. When I say they, it's just my guides. Intuitively, I have an image of, and I've been doing a lot of gardening lately, so this makes sense. It's about a plant that has outgrown its pot, right? Like its roots don't have anywhere else to go. There's no development. That plant is surviving, but it's not going to be thriving until you transplant it into a larger pot. That process of transplanting is actually kind of traumatizing to plants. Did you know that? Like for me, I've learned to actually talk my plants through that process. And you know, it sounds silly, but it's all about energetics. It's all about vibrations, letting my plants know that they are safe as they transition from their comfort zone that got a little too small into a new, bigger territory. That it might feel uncomfortable at first, but there's so much room for growth there. All right. So that's the metaphor that I wanted to share with you, because we are all beginning to understand the ways in which we are plants that need to be repotted, that our old way of seeing the world. And again, this might tie in with what's going on in the world at large, what's going on with America right now, but this is going to be a very personal discussion with yourself. Okay? It is very much about the ideas that you have internalized. All right? So that's kind of some big energy going on. Another thing that's going on, one more thing I got to talk about, you guys. On June 23rd, Neptune's going retrograde. Okay, so that makes planet number 6 that is going to be going retrograde, or that will be retrograde by the end of June. Neptune is currently in Pisces, which is a sign that it rules. Neptune and Pisces are really all about universal love. I'm going to be honest with you. That's the focus that they want me to kind of, the way that I'm being guided to approach this particular aspect. Okay. It's about that feeling that you get, that just universal love that you have for mankind. Like if you draw your attention away from all the really horrible and terrible and ugly and nasty things that humans are capable of doing and are showing us now, that they are capable of doing. Okay, there's that feeling. Try to move closer towards, just imagine right now for a moment, what it feels like to just love your fellow man. That is an energy that this Neptune retrograde wants to bring back to us, because there's a lot of anger. I think this is the one aspect that is really going to tie in to what is going on with the world at large. There's a lot of anger, there's a lot of rage, there's a lot of division, there's a lot of confusion, right? So just being able to transcend our differences. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't want to sugarcoat what's happening in the world. Transcending our differences is not going to put an end to systemic racism or the abuse of force by those in power. It's not. But it can help inspire us to make those changes happen. If you just take a moment to tap in and try to remember that we are all one. Okay? Warts and all, we are all one. On a personal level, this Neptune retrograde is really going to be doing a lot. And in fact, I'm going to say on a social level as well, really going to be doing a lot to point out any illusions that we have been operating under. Specifically, I believe when it comes to our place in the world, when it comes to the way that we relate, not just to our friends and our family and our neighbors and our coworkers, because that's what Venus is all about, right? Venus is the personal planet that shares an energy with Neptune, the transpersonal planet. So when you transcend your daily life and the people that you're actually interacting with in your real life relationships, and you begin to think of your place in the whole of humanity, that's where we're going to be looking for any illusions, okay? Also, I feel like any illusions about the narratives that we've been coerced into internalizing. Let me explain what that means, that we've been coerced into internalizing narratives. A really good example is the narrative of racism, okay? So if you don't like politics, go ahead and click off now. I'm going to go ahead and talk about this. There are a lot of, and by the way, if you don't know, I am a white person. I'm just going to be very honest about that. What I've been trying to do in the past several weeks, and I think a lot of well-intending white people are doing this, just trying to take a step back and say, well, now I'm going to take a moment to make sure that I'm using my voice in a way that is beneficial to all. And my personal take on that is that I can use my voice and my understanding of history, my understanding of how systemic racism has developed and persisted in America, my understanding of the intellectual history behind white supremacy. I'm just trying to use that to talk to other people who don't necessarily realize that they are complicit. All right. So when we say that we've been coerced into a narrative of, that we've internalized, then that means somebody in power has written the story that, it's just a few bad apples, or, the police are doing their jobs, or, things like that. And then we begin to internalize that, right? The particular narrative that many well-meaning white people have internalized is, I'm not racist. And it's true, you might not be racist, but we have grown up in a world that is full of racist and race-driven narratives, right? That we have begun to internalize. And so just beginning to talk to people about where their ideas about the issue come from. Where are any illusions, any sort of confusion? How can we clear up what the issue really is, what the message really is, how we got here? Because it's been through the casting of illusions, the creation of false narratives, okay? So these are stories that we've been told that have been forced upon us. And they've been so persistently forced upon us that we even begin to tell them to ourselves. All right. And it doesn't have to be about racism. It really doesn't. That is just, in my mind, like when I look out at the world and the society and the people that I'm interacting with right now, that's just one example of the way in which I think that this Neptune retrograde is going to begin to open a lot of eyes. Illusions about how we got here, what is really going on, and what can we do about it are going to begin to be exposed. Again, we don't expect resolution here, but just exposing these things and bringing them out to the light is going to be very, very important. For some reason, intuitively, I've been getting this for a while, but I also, I think that this is going to happen specifically when it comes to American media. I don't know if you guys know how much the media is lying to us or how much the government is lying to the media, etc., etc. I mean, this is a real thing that's happening in America today. It's been going on for a long time. Definitely, if you're interested, if you want to know what's really happening on the ground as far as protests, demonstrations, reforms within police departments, seeking justice in this situation, if you really want to know what's going on, you've got to get in touch with somebody whose feet are on the ground. Or you've got to get your information from somebody whose feet is on the ground, because those in power are going to do their best to create the illusion that the revolution is not here. And I think a lot of us kind of know that, at least in its beginning phases, it is. All right. And I don't mean that to be a scary thing. But when I say revolution, I mean like real forces that are in play that will be affecting change in this country. I'm hopeful for it. I'm not wearing my rose-colored glasses for it. No, I had to throw those away. Okay. Neptune retrograde actually can kind of tempt us to put those rose-colored glasses back on. This way of looking at the world where, peace and love and light are just going to get us through. Or, all humans are the same. I don't even see color, right? Those are rose-colored lenses narratives. All right? Neptune retrograde wants us to take off the rose-colored lenses, see the world for what it really is, see our place in the world for what it really is, and to try to frame that in universal brotherly love as much as we possibly can. Okay? So just to kind of wrap things up, on July 12th, Mercury will be going direct. On July 20th, we're going to have our second new moon in Cancer. I think we will have been on a whole ass roller coaster by the time we get to that second new moon in Cancer. By the way, this in and of itself is a unique astrological event. It's called, of course, a blue moon. Not just the two new moons are not happening in the same month, but they're happening in the same moon cycle. So that first one, pardon me, the first new moon in Cancer happens on the Gemini side, all right? Which is going to kind of amplify that energy of Mercury being in Cancer. How can we begin to make sense of our emotions and intuition? And then that second Cancer new moon is going to be on the Leo side. Now that we've done all that thinking and processing, how can we put that into action? How can we move forward? How can we make a real, honest show of support? Also, you guys, a reemergence of confidence. Some of you guys, a lot of us, okay? Just what's going on in the world can really make us feel like we're not that brave, we're not that strong, we're not that courageous. All right. Also, going through the process of doing shadow work can actually begin to affect your confidence if you don't inject that process with self-love, self-acceptance, and self-forgiveness at regular intervals. All right. So that's what you're being encouraged to do. Do the shadow work, but take good care of yourself all the while. By the time we get through this eclipse season, we're going to begin to feel a lot more in our power, a lot more in alignment with our heart's desire. So, as usual, guys, if this resonated with you, or if you just found this interesting, hit that like button before you go. Make sure that you are staying happy, healthy, and hopeful. And I'm going to connect with you guys again as soon as possible. Keep your eye out for that pick a pile reading.